if you're somebody that's watching this that may, be going through this right now, then I really do pray that this video is able to open your eyes, just through my experiences and the revelations, that the Most High has shown me over the, past several years that, yeah, longer than several years. It's been a lifetime of experiences, really. Things have happened that in your life that, beyond coincidence. Obviously we learn that things happen for a reason. And you can now directly see back when those experiences happened throughout your childhood, throughout your adolescence, that that wasn't just a coincidence, right? You were being shown certain things. Certain people came into your life to basically, give you those experiences. And those experiences have now led you where you are now, right? You are now on a trajectory where you're starting to see the forest for the trees, and you can actually basically, see your direction, your path, very clearly. Okay, and that's not by no coincidence. I believe coincidences happen, but I'm not really a man of coincidences anymore. Especially when you walk by faith and not by sight. It's a lot of the time we have to trust our faith, and that God shows us certain things. The Most High will put certain certain individuals on our path, and put us in certain situations to help us grow, to help us be able to see things a lot clearer, right? To help us to navigate these certain situations that we get put in. Now, a lot of churches, most churches that you see out there, are 501c3 operated churches. Now, I know that that's an American term, given by the American government for American churches, but I'm going to use that for Canada, Australia here, United Kingdom, all these westernized countries. They all have these government run, and I could be wrong, it could be for places in like Europe and that as well, but they are basically all controlled by the government, right? And what does that mean? That means that, they are basically, they're given a doctrine, right? And, let's look at, Jehovah's Witness. You got Mormons, you got Episcopalians, you got Baptists, you got Pentecostal, you got Seventh-day Adventists, you've got just your regular mainstream Christianity that you see out there, you've got Catholicism, and look, at the end of the day, I can sit here, right, till the cows come home and name, and name all of these different denominations out there, right? There's so many of them, right? If you know the number, drop that down below in the comments. I think it's a ridiculous amount. Like, I heard the number the other day, and that blew my mind. It was like as if there's that many different denominations out there. But so there's basically a different flavor, right, for each and every individual who comes across the Most High, right? Who, like it says in the book of Jeremiah, you seek the Father out and you find him, right? And your life changes, right? You have this experience where you might not necessarily, like, everybody comes to the Most High in all different unique ways, and that's the beautiful thing about it. The body is revealed all different types of ways. That's why I love hearing people's testimonies, and I'm sure many of you can relate to out there. Everybody's got such a unique testimony that we can all relate to, because at the end of the day, we've all come to him, but we've all come to him in a different way. So I absolutely love hearing people's testimonies, but nonetheless, we're all given at the end of the day, we're given this revelation, this truth, right? We find this truth, and what happens is, now that we find this truth, we will be given a candy shop, right, of all these different flavors, right? You can pick from this, you can pick from that, you can pick from this, you can pick from that, you can pick from basically any type of flavor, right, that we give you, right? And the candy shop is the world, the candy shop is the government, right? So automatically now they want control over your walk now. So this is where the trap slowly starts to get put in place, right? You want the rat to walk into the trap, right? So you set the cheese there. The cheese is the different denominations, right? And you want that rat to walk through the trap. And what do you want the rat to do? You want the rat to bite the cheese. As soon as the rat, right, bites the cheese, he is now stuck in that trap, right? And I know that this might sound crazy, right? This might sound completely, you know, against the grain, but just hear me out. Because at the end of the day, we are given all of these different denominations. We are basically, we're told what to believe. We're told, okay, you want to follow God. But at the end of the day, who is really directing that? Is the Most High the one who's directing that? And I want to make a statement right now. The Most High, he will use anybody and anyone he wants, right? If he needs to get you to hear the word, he might bring you to a church around the corner. I've personally heard stories that, and myself, I was given a place to, look to find the truth, right? So that's completely understandable. And you can see how that would work, because the Most High is the one who, he wants you to hear the word. But in order to hear the word, you might have to go down to a church, let's just say around the corner from you. You might have to go to any church just to hear the word. And the Most High might be the one bringing you there, because you need to hear the word, right? You need to be given the source of life, which is the word. And in order for you to do that, you might be directed to go to a certain church, right, which are giving the word. Can we all agree with that? Can we all relate to where I'm coming from? Let me know if that makes sense. Okay, so the Most High is not setting you up for failure, because he wants to give you the word. But he also wants you to be guided by his Spirit. And you see, this is the thing. A lot of the churches out there are not teaching you to walk in spirit and in truth. A lot of the churches out there, what's happening is they're giving you they give you the word, but they do it to fit their own narrative of how their church is portraying a certain part on the world stage, if that makes sense. And this brings me to my next point, because a lot of the churches that we see out there are government-run 501c3 churches. And these government-run 501c3 churches, well, they get given tax exemptions, right? Which means, let me repeat that, they are operating on this world stage, and they're basically getting their church paid for, which means they are all for profit, okay? And so obviously the church is run by the members there, and, from what I've been able to correlate and see, what happens is, they get given, like the pastors, the people who run the church, they get given a salary, right? And they will get paid, like that. It's actually like a paid job to become a pastor or a preacher. And so what will happen is, for a lot of us, in particular for a lot of us men, we will get called to, deliver the word. So what they will do is they will send us to seminary college, right? But what we have to understand is, what I want to directly correlate this with today is everything that I've just spoken about these government 501c3 churches. How do they now correlate with these seminary colleges? Right, so these seminary colleges are where you basically go to get taught doctrine. These seminary colleges are where you go if you want to become a pastor, right, for a church. They will give you the doctrine of said denomination, right, to learn the Bible. And well, the moral of the story here is I want to, just help you understand that the ones behind the seminary college, right? So the ones behind the seminary college are the ones giving you the doctrine that you learn, right? And the doctrine that you learn, you also learn a specific eschatology with that doctrine, which means, for anybody who doesn't know out there, the word eschatology just means your interpretation of the end times and of, like, let's just say the book of Revelation, right? Your interpretation of that, right? So, we have historicism, we have futurism, we have, preterists. So we have all these different types of eschatology, and basically they will teach you, mind you, that the seminary colleges are all government funded, right? They're all government funded, which means that they come from the government, right? And we know that the Jesuits, right, are behind the seminary colleges. Okay, so if the Jesuits are behind the seminary colleges, that means that they're teaching you whatever doctrine that they want you to have. And, just hear me out, because this isn't an attack against anybody who's gone to seminary college. I'm just trying to explain to you how the whole world system works, right? So you will come out of seminary college, and then what happens is that you're given a role on this world stage, right? To become a pastor, a preacher, right? To become a part of these, Baptist churches, Pentecostal churches, all different types of churches. And basically you all have the same kind of, little details might be different, right? But basically at the end of the day, they all boil down to, you've learned the core fundamentals, and the core fundamentals you can all agree on, right? And they all come from the way that the seminary college teaches scripture. And my point here today is that the way that they teach scripture is how they want you to interpret scripture, not how necessarily the scripture might say, right? Or, how the Bible might interpret that, the way it's written, the context that it's written, the audience relevancy. Who was that scripture speaking to at that certain point in time? What does this scripture mean? Who was that verse said to? What part of this timeline now are we being told? They are the ones who teach you that, so therefore they have control over how you basically learn, right? And so what happens is, it's like a domino effect. Enter the funnel system. And so you learn from the place where you need to go and learn, and then what happens is you get, to become somebody who then teaches that to other people, right? Which can be very, very dangerous, because if you're not teaching them the right, things, that can be very dangerous. And so the whole construct, we've now been able to correlate that, it comes from the 501c3 churches, and after that, it gets funneled through the system, where as to that doctrine, like I said, every different flavor, and there's so many different flavors that you can choose from, right? They basically, have that control now over your walk. So we got the 501c3 system, and, I also want to point out that there are other churches, there are other camps out there who might not be a part of this 501c3 system, but they still run the same way, okay? So they're not run by the government, but basically whatever lessons they teach on Saturday or Sunday, whatever lessons they teach, to their members of the congregation, that all comes from the umbrella structure. And that umbrella structure comes from the organization at the top of said, at the top of that organization, right? It comes from the top. So they are basically, for the majority of the part, they're teaching on, whatever that elder, whatever that pastor wants them to, that's overseeing that congregation. They're getting taught whatever that elder or pastor wants them to know. So their walk with God is basically being controlled and guided, by somebody else. And, this should ring alarm bells for anybody who is, a true seeker, that's walking in spirit and in truth, and that's seeking the truth, because that your path, your direction and trajectory with the Most High, right, to learn and study, and, wherever He wants you to, whatever your purpose is, whatever your purpose is on this earth, He needs to be the one that's telling you and showing you these things, which means that He will guide you and show you, certain things on your walk. But if you keep getting these doctrines, shoved down your throat, and you're not growing on your walk with the Most High, this is a problem. And I just want to point out quickly that not all churches, right, there's some churches where you go and, you grow, right? They They help you on your trajectory of your walk. And that's a blessing. That's a great thing. I'm sure that there's a few churches out there that are very rare, but nonetheless, you will find churches out there that will help you with your trajectory of your walk, right? But it would be very, very rare that you find a church like that, even if it's just a body of believers, that are doing that, that you classify yourselves as a church, where two or more are gathered in his name, which is literally what the word says. It doesn't say that it has to be a building, right? So there might be one or two churches out there that are helping you grow. But for the most part, what you have to understand is that for a lot of the time, what I've seen from my own experiences, and let me know if this is something that you've also found, but you are just another number, right? You are just an underling to them, right? You're just another number, and at the end of the day, what matters is that you're there, you're paying tithes, right? You're paying tithes to the church, and you're just another number in their system, right? And in that system, they just want to get as many souls as they can in their church denomination, right? And unfortunately, the sad thing is, this is how a lot of these churches operate. And a lot of people who are truth seekers, what I've found is they find themselves within these church constructs to go and have fellowship. Like I said, the Most High may have brought them to hear the word somewhere. Just because the Most High brings you somewhere, for you to hear the word, it doesn't necessarily mean that he needs you to stay loyal to that construct, right? What matters to him first and foremost is that you stay loyal to him and his spirit. He needs you to grow in his spirit, right? He needs you to grow in spirit and in truth. And sometimes, a lot of these churches become corrupted. Sometimes a lot of these, and he needs you to see, right, that at the end of the day, he may have brought you here, right, at this certain point in time, but he also needs you to see the things that he's giving you, the revelations that he's giving you, the convictions that he's putting on your spirit. That's all for a reason. It's all because you're growing, right? And if you're having these growing pains, if you feel like, hey, I'm not growing where I am, my walk is being completely convoluted by the teachings that I'm getting given, right? Because the Most High has given me his word, I'm now starting to see things, he's showing me certain things, and it's not lining up here in this place that I am, right? So I know a lot of people will stay loyal to that, specific construct. And unfortunately, what happens is that person doesn't end up growing on their spiritual walk. They don't end up maturing to the level where the Most High wants them to mature. And, the Most High may want that person to grow to a certain level, right? The Most High needs them to, grow to a certain level on their walk. And because they're choosing to stay loyal to the church, but not to the Most High, but to that specific church, right? That church has now, if there's things that are going on there that the Most High is showing them, because, they're staying loyal to that church has now become an idol, right? Because they're placing that church above the Most High. And that church, at the end of the day, basically, it's like, and I've heard people say this term, and I can completely relate to it, that church becomes a hoarder of souls, right? Because at the end of the day, those souls are being trapped in that one place, and a lot of those souls aren't really growing in spirit and in truth. And I see a lot of truth seekers out here who they, are after truth, okay? They are after being led by the Spirit of the Most High. And a lot of times what happens is we see things like, from my own personal experience, some things that I've seen, within these churches are fear, manipulation, and control, okay? And these three things here are not of the Most High. Okay, they'll take scripture completely out of context, and somebody who is a true seeker, somebody who critically thinks about these things, will think, hey, hang on a minute, you're taking the scripture here out of context. And that's why you have to be led by his Spirit, because his Spirit will show you that you are being manipulated. Like it says in the book of John, right? He will guide you into all things truth. His Spirit will guide you into all things truth. No matter how uncomfortable it is, he will show you all of these things. So sometimes you will feel very uncomfortable because these things are happening. You will feel very convicted on your spirit because you're going through these certain things and you're being shown these things and you're thinking, wow, is this actually happening? Right? And, let me know if this is something that you've also experienced. Sometimes we get too caught up in our indoctrination. Sometimes we get too, complacent in our constructs, that have been built for us, our confines, that we forget the walk is about being in spirit and in truths. So, if you've been hurt by the church, just understand, maybe the Most High was making you see all of the things that are wrong so you can go back to Him, right? Because He wants you to have a personal relationship with Him, right? And a lot of these churches, let's use the Catholic Church, for example, right? So many beautiful people inside of these constructs, these confines. But, they teach you that the Pope is the Mr. Grandiose, right? No one is above the Pope, right? So if you want to go to the church, if you want to go to the Most High, you have to go to confession, right? They don't teach you that you have to go directly to Him and pray. You have to pray to the saints, right? You gotta worship all of these saints. But whatever you do, don't pray to, don't ask God to be seeked out in spirit and in truth. It's crazy. Unfortunately, this is what a lot of these these churches teach you, that you have to go to an intercessor, right? When you're a babe on your walk, of course it's good to be guided, by someone who can, maybe lead you, to grow further on your walk, okay? So that's understandable when you're a babe. But the Most High, He does not want you to be a babe forever. This is where He wants you to go from milk to meat, right? So then you can be that person that, can help guide others, right? Because you have been guided by the Most High. But a lot of these churches, sometimes, like I said from the beginning of the video, they will be a good place for you to, be, brought there so that you can learn the word, right? You can receive milk. But understand, a lot of these churches don't want you to grow. A lot of these churches will keep you stuck on milk forever, right? They will stop your growth. They will hinder your growth. And when we're talking the Most High, right? When we're talking salvation, this is the most important thing that your life depends on, right? So it's not like it's a small deal, right? It's not like, oh, well, I'm just going to put it on the back burner. I've got too much on my plate, right? I need to focus on my career first. I need to focus on work first. I need to focus on everybody else first. Let me just put this on the back burner. You see what we do in this flesh? And this, at the end of the day, is what's hindering our growth. We put the Most High on the back burner when He wants to be first and foremost in your life. Right? He wants you to grow in spirit and in truth each and every single day. When you fall, right, He wants you to get back up again. Like it says in Proverbs, a righteous man stumble, he falls 7 times, but he'll always get back up again, right? A lot of these places are giving us milk, and we're getting stuck on milk for the rest of our life. We don't really truly understand and internalize the spiritual walk of mastering, how to master the inner man. And how to master that inner man comes from a lifetime of experiences that Christ shows us, from not only His word, but we have experiences that we meet people, and, people come into our lives, and, through these experiences, we then match everything to the word, right? You can't look at this walk and think, I keep all of these laws, I do all of these things, yet I'm a ravenous wolf on the inside. And my inner man is, I don't have that love there. I don't love my brothers and sisters how I should love them, and I, first and foremost, the only reason why I'm speaking about this is because I'm guilty of all of these things. I've been guilty of all of these things, and I'm only talking to you today, from my own experience, as I'm sure many of you out there can relate to this, I've learned that, what's on the inside is how we're going to be judged. The Most High will judge our hearts. He will judge our hearts. He will judge our inner man first and foremost, our spirit, which is what we can't see. but the Most High sees our spirit, you know. And that's why, Christ gave so many lessons on, he says that how you choose to judge other people, that same measurement is going to be measured back to you. So be very careful who you point the finger at, right? Be very careful how you treat other people. We become so puffed up on knowledge that we forget to treat our brothers and sisters. We forget to treat other people. We forget to love them as we love ourselves. So there's all these different things that, on this walk that we have to navigate. And another thing that I've learned from these churches, right? Because you're meant to be merciful and compassionate, right? You might see these things once or twice and think, we're all mankind at the end of the day, We make mistakes, these things happen. But when you start seeing a direct pattern happening over and over and over and over and over again, right? You can now see that the Most High is showing you these things, and you now need to take a direction, and you now need to seek him out in prayer and ask him what you need to do, right? And a lot of these churches, what I've found is they will actually say that, they will tell their congregation, right? How they excommunicate and treat people who leave their congregation. They will say that this person has now gone back into the world, right? They will teach the people there that person who now has left their congregation, this person has now gone back into the world. In reality, that person could be being shown things from the Most High. And the Most High is showing them these things and teaching them that, hey, that you might need to move away from here because you're not growing here. This church is off, right, with a lot of their fruits and a lot of what they're teaching, right? You need to move away from this church. So that now becomes very dangerous on that person who is now teaching that to the congregation. That now becomes very dangerous for that pastor, right, that preacher. And a lot of times, they will teach them that, hey, if you go back, right, if you leave this group that you're a part of, right, you're going to be a sitting duck out there, right? And, this is why, I'm going to say this is a caveat, but fellowship is very important. Iron sharpens iron, and, it's a blessing when the fellowship comes. But they make you think that, the whole walk is basically, they are responsible for that, for your walk. They are the ones that, you need to be around people all the time. And what happens if you're not around people all the time? Satan's going to get you when you're alone. If you're somebody out there who walks in spirit and in truth, you're going to go directly to the Most High for answers, right? And look, we've all been guilty of times where we slipped up and, sometimes we have let, Satan get the best of us, right? It's happened. It happens. But for the majority of the part, you're somebody who's going to put the Most High first and foremost. Go on a fast. Seek him in spirit and in truth. What happens is the Most High will start to elevate you, right? Because you're leaning on him more than you're leaning on the church. Does that make sense, my brothers and sisters? I hope that makes sense because, this is what I've found. So they're teaching things that are basically completely contrary to a lot of the personal experiences that I've had. And I know I'm not the only one. I know a lot of you out there, have had these similar experiences, and that's a blessing. We might be in all these different parts of the world, right? But we can all relate because we're all trying to, at the end of the day, walk in spirit and in truth. And, these things can be very dangerous, because they can hinder our salvation, right? They can hinder our salvation when we're not taking care of the inner man, when we're not focusing on the teachings of, how Christ really teaches you to crucify that ego, to crucify that flesh and to really just love, And if you watch a lot of near-death testimonies, you will see that there's a pattern that starts to begin. A lot of people who have these, revelations, when they meet, the Most High face to face, through his Son, right? His Son will then show them that, a lot of the time that these people were lacking love. The frequency when you leave this earth, that frequency is a euphoria that you can't explain, right? It's a certain love that comes from the Most High. And that love, at the end of the day, that's how we have to, operate when we're walking in this day-to-day life. You know, as hard as it can be sometimes. That's why he really emphasizes crucifying the flesh, you know, and getting rid of the ego, right? Being very, very careful. You know, he talks about in Paul's letters about not becoming too puffed up on knowledge, because knowledge will puff us up, right? It will take us away from that inner alignment that we should have with the Most High. You know, but I've gone probably over about, over 40 minutes now. And, you know, I pray that this message can find, you know, anybody out there who's struggling, you know, or who's having, you know, these convictions. They're a part of a church that, you know, they feel like they're being mistreated. And not because it's some kind of, you know, cheap offense that you've been offended, maybe because your own, you know, you perhaps might be weak in the flesh. Pray about it. Ask the Most High, you know, if he's the one that's making you feel these convictions. Because he might be showing you something, and he might be telling you to step out on faith now, right? Go directly to the word, right? And sometimes that takes for you to make certain decisions that may be uncomfortable. But, you know, the Most High doesn't want you to be comfortable in a construct where you're not growing. You know, he doesn't want you to be comfortable in your walk, because when you become comfortable, what happens is you hinder your growth. And when you hinder your growth, you know, you start getting complacent, right? And, you know, this can be dangerous. You know, he doesn't want us to fall victim to false doctrine. He doesn't want us to, you know, stop growing in him. You know, it's a lifelong experience. It's a lifelong journey. And don't forget, you know, we're all sojourners just passing through. You know, one day we're all going to stand before the Most High, and we're all going to have to give an account of our life, you know. And, you know, the beautiful thing about that is how loving and how merciful and how patient he really is. You know, the more closer you grow to him, the more you just realize how much patience and love and mercy and compassion he has. And he really wants us to have that for our fellow brothers and sisters. So just to wrap things up, you know, I pray that you're able to gain some clarity from this message. And, you know, I pray that the Most High may keep you. And, you know, don't forget, first and foremost, it's about your personal relationship and seeking him in spirit and in truth. All right, much love to everybody out there, and I'll see you in the next video.